while our panelists make their way up to the front, I'll give you a sense of what we're going to hear from. So this is all about who does what. It's about preparedness, jurisdiction, cooperation. The idea being that over the next hour, we hope that we're going to help you understand who does what when it comes to wildfire preparedness, how the different parts of the system coordinate and how they communicate with each other, what the roles and responsibilities of community governments are, what the roles and responsibilities of Indigenous governments are, and where you can go for support as well. And things like if you don't know whose responsibility something is, how do you find that out? Who do you ask? And so we got a panel in front of us here. You will hear from over the next hour. We're going to hear first of all from Mike Gravel, who's Director of Forest Management Division at ECC. We've got Naum Lee from ECC's Land and Water Division, North Slave. Jen Potton from the Mackenzie Valley Land and Water Board. Michelle Pond from MACA's Emergency Management Office. Craig Halifax from the Office of the Fire Marshal. And Fred Behrens, the prize-winning Senior Administrative Officer at Community Government of Equity. And I am going to hand it over to get us started to Mike Gravel. Mike.
Thank you very much. First thing I'm going to do is get the elephant in the room out of the way. So I'm not nervous. I just have a natural shake. You should see me play Jenga. It's a display. So yeah, so thanks. I'm happy to be here this morning to kind of open up the session, lead off hitter, if you will. So I've been in the fire program pretty close to 35 years now, so my whole career here in the Northwest Territories. Yeah, so I guess over that time I've been involved with a number of critical fires. I know Toledo was mentioning yesterday, 96 was actually 95 when that fire happened, and I was involved directly in that as well. And then of course the last number of years here we've had numerous challenging seasons, so I guess I have a pretty decent perspective of the issues. When we speak about responsibilities and mandates, I think all our mandates are very clear. We know what our mandates are and our responsibilities are. Where it gets complicated, we heard very much yesterday, is that when fires encroach communities and all of us need to play together in the sandbox, including community governments and other people that aren't part of this panel, that's where things get complicated because we haven't worked through all those processes yet. And so that's largely, I think, what this week is about. When it comes to our mandate, we have the authority for wildfire management, so wildfire response, preparedness, and all the other aspects of fire management. And that authority is granted to our department, so the Department of Environment and Climate Change, through the Forest Protection Act. And the Forest Protection Act will soon be replaced by the Forest Act, so that Forest Act was recently approved. However, we have to finalize the regulations before it comes into force, but I hope for that to happen here soon. And the key document that we've relied on for over 30 years now is the Forest Fire Management Policy. So that really guides fire managers' decision-making with respect to how we respond to fires and manage fires. And you heard yesterday from Brent, who kind of gave a little history of the Forest Fire Management Policy. I think what I want to capture about that is just the fact that we moved away from a federal system, which was a zone system where every fire in this zone was fought and every fire outside of it was not fought. It was kind of a very simplistic system, but it led to a lot of challenging situations, especially if you leave fires in a zone that grow and then move into that priority zone. That's really where a lot of the problems happened. And not only that, but there's a lot of values in the other zones that need to be respected, and in many cases were not. So the policy we follow today, as discussed yesterday, was a values at risk policy. So we assess every single fire that starts, and a decision is made on the basis of that fire. So if a fire is in a remote area but threatening something of value, then it would make sense that we do something with that fire to protect the value. In the old system, that may not necessarily have been the case. So as I talked about, where things get complicated is when we kind of come into the interface. So the wildland-urban interface, there's all sorts of terms we could use for it, but when fires encroach the community, it gets complicated. So we are working through that. Again, that's what the purpose of this week is. We obviously work closely with MACA, so the Municipal and Community Affairs. They're responsible for emergency management, evacuations, and they have very close ties with communities. So we work closely with MACA. I work with Michelle quite regularly. We have what's called a wildfire event notification protocol between ECC and MACA. And that essentially just is a guideline for duty officers or fire managers that guides them to communicate with one another, if you will. You would think you wouldn't need that type of document, but it just keeps everything straight and to the point, if you will. Especially as people change over time, you sometimes have that corporate knowledge loss. So this document really helps guide anyone new to our program, and it kind of gives us a level of accountability as well. So essentially, anytime there's a fire within whatever proximity, we will be in contact with MACA both at the territorial level and at the regional level, and then communications with the community will happen. Likewise, the Office of the Fire Marshal, so Craig and I, more so recently, are working close together, discussing items such as cross-training, and there's cross-training going on here this week, which is great. Some of the folks are there right now. And also we're talking extensively about the wildland urban interface and the task teams. So some of the points that Rodney brought up yesterday, those are front and center on our discussions these days. So you can see that there's a lot of collaboration happening behind the scenes. I also want to mention that there's other initiatives underway. For example, the protocol that we have with MACA, we're working on similar protocols with other departments. So for example, health and social services. We heard yesterday, and we all recognize that under these recent evacuations, many critical, essential people left the communities, and it really put everyone that remained behind in a really tough spot. So we're trying to work with the other departments to put in place protocols that support their staff to stay and provide them the comfort, if you will, that they're going to be looked after. There's an evacuation plan for them. There's meals and everything else that's involved, that they're going to be part of the incident management team. So getting regular briefings and situational awareness. So it's essentially to provide that level of comfort that their people are safe. Because ultimately that's what happens, right? The many other departments or agencies that we rely on, this isn't their world. Fire isn't their world, and they don't understand it, and so they're scared. And so we just need to do a better job of educating them that we can manage the situation and support their staff. Obviously, we've heard and talked a lot about the community wildfire protection plans. Those are critical documents to kind of set the stage for what your community needs are and what actions need to happen to reduce the risk. So the community wildfire protection plans are the community's plans, and I think that really needs to be understood. They're not ECC's plans. They're not the contractor who wrote them plan. It's the community's plan. The community is the one that has authority and responsibility for what happens in your municipal boundaries, and therefore that's why that's your plan. ECC provides expertise and advice to go into that plan and to guide your decision making. And likewise, if it's a contractor, they're bringing you expertise, but at the end of the day, it's the community that should be signing off on that. Integrated into those plans, we saw a little bit yesterday about the interface response plans. So to me, that's really a critical piece, and it's an underutilized piece. In the most simplest sense, an interface response plan is, imagine a fire's come into town from the north. So we know that the north part of the town is now threatened. Well, what's there? What's being threatened? So how many properties, what infrastructure? How many sprinklers do we need to protect those properties? How many pumps do we need to feed water to those sprinklers? How much hose do we need to set it all up? How many people do we need to put it in place? How long does it take to do that? Get that all out of the way before a fire ever happens and you're ready to go. Don't wait for the middle of summer on a hot, windy day and a fire starts north of town and, oh, what do we do? What do we need? Where is it? How do I get it? Get that all done now while the lakes are frozen and there's snow in the bush. We could sit down and have your interface response done, not done, but put into a good place. And then, and my position on this is that this plan should be built by the local fire department and ECC. So your wildfire responders, the people that have to work together and implement that plan. They build it together, they test it together, they train together, and then when the need comes to put that plan into place, hopefully it never happens, but if it does, you have some level of confidence that you're ready, and you can focus on, the community can focus on other things because they know that the wildfire responders, the structural firefighters are ready to do their job. Related to that is the mitigation plans, risk mitigation plans, vegetation management plans, whatever you want to call them. But we talked yesterday about reducing the fuel around a community, changing the fuel, fuel breaks, all sorts of tools that we can do to mitigate risk. So that's another valuable tool that ECC has expertise in and can share and give advice in. But then that's where people like NAM and the Mackenzie Valley Resource Management Act come into play, because there's regulations that also have to be followed, especially if we are considering using heavy equipment in certain situations. So there's a bit more planning and lead time required for these mitigation plans, mitigation plans. But again, there's other people here, and you'll hear from them, that have a role with respect to that. And I think, again, I'm going to wrap up here, but to me, it's that interagency cooperation. So everyone on the panel here has a role. I talked about a number of people that aren't here that have a role, including Department of Infrastructure and Highways, Department of Transportation and airports. We heard yesterday how airport staff left. You know, we had the same issues, obviously. We're trying to manage our air tanker fleet and HERCs and everything else, and there's nobody. The tower here was going to leave, you know, so it was some crazy times, but all these people need to work together. And I know the conference or the workshop is called a NWT Wildfire Preparedness Workshop, but in many ways it could just be called the Interagency Cooperation Workshop, because that's really, at the end of the day, what we need to do. Is we all need to do this more. We need to do this in your communities, where we're all working together, sitting at the table together, talking about these issues.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Nahum Lee. I've been an inspector with environment and climate change for 20 years, in working for different, previously lands and previously the federal government, but enforcing the Mackenzie Valley Resource Management Act and the Mackenzie Valley Land Use Regulations and the Territorial Lands Act for 20 years. Our small division of environment and climate change gets involved, like Mike said, when we trigger any prohibitions under the land use regulations. The main trigger for affecting proper community wildfire preparedness plans would be the use of heavy equipment to remove vegetation and create fire breaks. And we have offices in Inuvik, Norman Wells, Fort Simpson, Yellowknife, Hay River, and Fort Smith, with officers that are available to help communities when working proactively through the permitting process. If you find your preparedness plan takes you outside of your community boundaries and onto territorial land where the land use regulations apply and the prohibitions are triggered. So we're here to help you assess whether or not you require a permit and help you through the permitting process by reviewing an application or guiding you towards the Land and Water Board. We're also here, we like to see the proactive end of things as well. We want to see all the communities prepared, but in the event of an emergency, we're also here to help you through how to report the activities that may have triggered under the land use regulations, but were allowed to happen without a permit due to the fact that we were dealing with a wildfire emergency. And I'll pass it on to my colleague, Jen.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, my name is Jen Potton. I work with the Mackenzie Valley Land and Water Board here in Yellowknife. You might be familiar with the Land and Water Board system. There's 4 Land and Water Boards up and down the valley, the Gwich'in and Inuvik, the Sahtu, which is out of Fort Good Hope, the Wakaji out of Yellowknife, and the Mackenzie Valley, which covers the Akecho and Decho regions. You might also be familiar with us. There's a couple of folks in this room who lean more to like municipal operations. So you might have a water license. That water license would be through the Land and Water Board, and that would be for water use, waste disposal, solid waste disposal facilities. But then, like Nahum was talking about, there's other things that need land use permits. And whether or not you need a land use permit depends on where your community boundaries are. So some communities have boundaries, some communities don't, and those are often designated communities. And so whether you have boundaries or not helps us decide through the legislation whether or not you need a land use permit to do clearing or use equipment, sometimes to have camps as well. So it depends on what activities that you want to do on the land. Sometimes people come to the Land and Water Board because they need a permit to do activities like cutting or clearing. And then in the case of an emergency, emergencies can proceed, but we do like to hear back at the end of the emergency about what had happened on the land so that we can track that as part of cumulative effects. And we work with the government of the Northwest Territories to track those cumulative effects and understand what's happening out there on the land. I think that's it for now. Thanks. Oh.
How about now? Oh, there we go. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Michelle Pond. I'm the head of the Emergency Management Organization with MACA. I think I know probably most of you. There's a few new faces for sure. What is emergency management? A lot of people think emergency management is evacuations, but it's actually more than just evacuations. It's preparedness, it's response, it's prevention and mitigation, and it's recovery from emergencies. Most of you here at community levels, you guys deal with the majority of your municipal emergencies yourselves. You can deal with those on the front line and very well versed in that. And we have a lot of communities here who are really well versed in dealing with larger scale emergencies, the ones that fall under the NWT Emergency Management Act. One of the key roles of emergency management organization, the EMO, is that we work collectively with all of the other GNWT departments and our community governments to support emergency management here in the NWT. Emergency management is everyone's responsibility. I think we've all heard that before. And it doesn't matter, residents have a role to play and all levels of government have a role to play. And throughout Canada, including here in the NWT, emergency management legislation assigns responsibility for emergencies to local authorities or community governments. And so that being said, community governments are required to have community emergency plans. And having strong, well-developed plans is a vital part to any emergency response effort. You also are probably familiar with those community emergency plans are required to be updated annually. And I think one of the things that is also really important to note is just testing of those plans. It will strengthen how we prepare for, respond to, mitigate, and then recover from emergencies, including wildfires. And I think we continue learning all the time. We're learning from our own events here in the territory, but also nationally and globally as well. Through EMO, part of our role is to offer workshops and tabletop exercises to all of our communities and partners. So we can facilitate workshops and test and validate your plans with you. And we also have developed quite an array of tools and resources for communities to use to develop those plans and to test those plans as well. Just as Mike had said, we work really closely with ECC, both the Forest Management Division and their hydrology team as well, especially leading up to wildfire and flood season. So right now, keeping an eye on things for the South Slave in the Hay River area, and just we'll monitor the flood season right through until breakup. So is completed through the Mackenzie Valley. Some of you will probably remember having participated in some of our joint workshops and tabletop exercises and seen the benefits of the collaboration with all the different partners involved, whether it's local, regional, and or territorial. I think it was last year, where did I see Pushp? We had done a workshop with Betchico, and we actually had one of the ECC regional folks from the Forest Management Division come in, and so we were able to collaborate in that way, not just updating the community emergency plan, but also looking at the community wildfire protection side of things as well. And so lots of really good benefit in having that ongoing collaboration. The NWT-EMO can also provide other supports to local authorities and their local emergency management organizations. We call those LEMOs. And we can assist during various emergencies when required as well. So we also administer the disaster assistance policy with the GNWT when it is applied. That's a cabinet policy, so we would have to get cabinet approval. And once that's applied, then our office will lead the administration of the application of that policy. In 2024, the spring last year, we updated the NWT emergency plan to better clarify roles and responsibilities of the GNWT departments that support community governments and when their capacity has been exceeded. It also we added a couple of annexes for community governments, and it better articulates the roles of community governments and what types of expenses would be reimbursable. I feel like that's something that wasn't very clear before, and so we're trying to do a better job of making sure that people know in advance what could be reimbursed during a disaster. We also updated the evacuation and hosting guidelines, and I would say in the community emergency plans, that's one area, even the really well-developed ones, that is an area that those communities have worked really hard on getting that part updated, is the evacuation and hosting. And what we're seeing now is that there are some communities that wouldn't necessarily have been able to host in the past, but they have been hosting smaller numbers of evacuees as well. And I think that's really good because it ties, staying within regions and in nearby communities allows for family and cultural ties that wouldn't necessarily be available if we sent people to a larger community. So that's something to keep in mind when you're developing those plans as well. I think the biggest thing is, the takeaway for me today is if you need help developing your community emergency plans or updating those, reach out to our regional superintendents in each of the regions, we have a regional emergency management coordinator as well, and they can help guide you through the updating of those plans. Thanks to the organizers who put this together, and thanks to everybody here today for everything that you guys do to protect your communities.
I think it's working. Good enough. My name's Craig Halifax. I'm the NWT Fire Marshal based here in Yellowknife. One thing I wanted to touch on before I get into particulars about the OFM mandate and jurisdiction as it relates to wildfire is the Department of Municipal Community Affairs as a whole. Its role is to support communities in a variety of functions: community operations, planning, infrastructure planning, development plans, and that sort of thing. So myself and Michelle are here representing our particular divisions, but there's many other divisions within MACA that will have the ability to provide support and guidance to communities. One example would be capital planning. So if you're looking at infrastructure development, adding water systems, this sort of thing, looking at equipment purchasing, through funding that might be available. There's a team within MACA to support that, as well as community governance. When you're looking at bylaw development, that might include items around building construction requirements and that sort of thing that you might incorporate to address fire smart principles within your governance structure. There's a team within MACA that can support that as well. We are a support and guidance. We aren't the doers of the work. That's the role of the community and the local government, and we're there to assist you. Now, particular to the Office of the Fire Marshal, we have a sort of couple different work areas that would be implicated within the wildfire preparedness environment. Under the Fire Prevention Act, which is our guiding legislation, we administer the National Building Code, falls under the purview of the Office of the Fire Marshal. So any construction activity, new building, alteration, repair of structures in the NWT, unless they are exempted under our regulation, are required to file a scope of work or plans and specifications to our office for review for compliance with the National Building Code. So that ties into, again, the fire smart principles and non-combustible construction and that sort of thing. So if you are looking at increasing your level of protection through legislation at the local level, it would go through our governance section, but would involve us to ensure full compliance with the building code as well. So that's in the building environment. It's not well known that that falls within the OFM, hence I'll make the plug at this group for that. And then as it relates to support to communities and their fire departments, that's another key piece of the work we do within the OFM through our community fire protection strategy that was launched about 6-7 years ago. We assist fire departments, provide guidance in operations, standard operating procedures, training, and sort of all aspects of what the fire department must be involved in and oversee within their local area. I can say, based on Mike's comments and what we've heard, is WUI is a gray area. It was gray in Alberta. I was in Alberta when that was being developed and whatnot, so I have some knowledge and understanding of the process that was followed there. Is forestry in Alberta and similarly in the NWT would work up to municipal boundary, and structural firefighters would worry about structures. But as those meet, who is trained and who manages that? Well, it's both. We need to integrate better at a community level, the community fire departments and community members, along with ECC, and how they work together. And to Mike's comment, this is more about interagency cooperation than solely about preparedness. It'll be within the fire chiefs that are in the room. I guess a bit of an elephant in the room is currently MAC is undergoing some organizational change, structural changes internally that are being worked on. I can't announce them publicly as of now, but it has had an effect on fire training and structural fire training. So I suspect I've already heard comments about it. Whether questions come up for this panel or off to the side, I will answer to the best of my ability, but there's still a few things in work that aren't public knowledge as of yet. So that's all I got.
Good morning. Now, my name's Fred Behrens, and I'm the SAO for Wequity. But I've been around so long that I got to tell you a little bit of history. Back in, I think it was the early 80s, I was living in Betchico, or Ray Edzo at the time. And there was a small fire on the north arm on a lake called Chetabuktu Lake. And in the middle of July, nice, beautiful sunny day, the wind was starting to pick up, and all of a sudden that fire blew up and went past Edzo and around Marion Lake. And if you know Ray and Edzo, Ray has an area called Bay Island. And I was driving on Bay Island this day, and the fire, there's a channel that runs along Marion Lake that separates Ray from the other side of the mainland. Well, that fire came right up to the channel, and there were flames all over the place. And we weren't evacuated. No one even cared really about the fire that was only, a few feet away from us. So that died eventually. And then in 98, I became the mayor of Mexico and was working in the Legislative Assembly one day where I did 2 years of work, drove back to Ray, and I see this plume of smoke. But holy smokes, something's going on. I get up to Frank Channel, and the RCMP are sitting there blocking everything. Edzo's been evacuated. You can't get into Edzo. I said, why not? I'm the mayor. He said, no, you can't get in. I said, well, according to the Emergency Measures Act, I am God in an emergency, so let me into my community. Of course they did. And we went and set up the Emergency Operations Center at the Chief Jimmy Bruno School and had a beautiful view of the bombers doing their thing. And fortunately, because of the bombers flying over every 2 or 3 minutes, whatever it was, we saved Edzo, as well as our fire department, and Rick's Trucking, the local water contractor, had the water out and were dosing all the ambers, because that fire was only about 1 kilometer away from Edzo. Fortunately, after 2 days of fighting fire, the wind changed and the rain came, so we were able to call down the fire and everyone came back. So that's 2 experiences with wildfires. Then I moved to Aklavik. I've been in Fort Liard where I had to do a 100-year flood and negotiate with the federal government for claims for damages. Aklavik, every year we did exercises to make sure that our flood was taken care of if we did have a flood there. Then I moved to Wequity. The disastrous year of 2023 started with Wequity being the first community to evacuate. And because Wequity is so nice and small, we did a perfect evacuation. We had a member of MACA there who just happened to be there for recreation activities, but jumped in, took care of it with my staff to register all the evacuees and get them to the airport in time so they could get out. We had approximately 40 people leave. The community is 140 people. 40 left. Our chief and the director of community for Klitschko government were sitting in Yellowknife at Air Tindy waiting for the residents to come in. So everything was taken care of. What really surprised me, we have one medical practitioner in the community. She came to me and said, what do I do? Do I evacuate or what? And I said, as the only person with medical experience in this community, you stay here because we need you. The same thing happened with the store. All the store people were going to leave. I phoned up the Klitschko Investment Corp and said, hey, if we need something in the store, I'm going to knock the damn door down because I'm going to get stuff done. And that's it. So that was fine. 3 days later, the residents came back to Wequity. My wife and I took off and came to Yellowknife for a climate change conference. 3 days after, well, we attended the conference. Then we drove down to Halifax to attend my grandson's soccer games. While in Halifax, we drove through the worst flood of Halifax history, where 4 people were killed in, one child actually was found 70 kilometers away from where he had been put into the water. It was amazing, bloody crazy. Came back to Yellowknife, and of course that was just a few days before Yellowknife was evacuated. And this is where I call the time of the 4 communities being forgotten. Fort Rez, Lutsuke, Gamete, and Wequity were totally forgotten during the Yellowknife evacuation. And most of the time, that I was sitting in Wequity, we did not know that there was really anything going on in Yellowknife. We didn't know. We had 3 float planes from Air Tindy come in and land by our airport. And the pilot said there will not be any passenger flights for 10 days. That was it. No one said anything else. So we sat for basically a month not knowing what the heck was going on. People were wondering where their medicines were for prescriptions. No one knew where mail was coming from, and I was on the phone constantly trying to find out what is happening in the community, but no one could tell us. We ended up getting a charter flight from Clecho government to bring food in, and we had a flight of frozen pizza. That was our first supply of food that came into the community. So we had a lot of fun for the month that we didn't know anything was going on. But let's get on with this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panel. I think I learned a lot from that. I learned that if you see Fred arrive in your community, roll out the wildfire or flood defense plans, because one of them might be needed. The whole point here, and I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions, is to get a sense from each of these guys. If you've got gaps in your knowledge, if there are things you want to talk about here, we've clearly got a great panel of experts that can answer most of the issues that people might have in terms of who governs what and how we get stuff done here. I want to start just quickly by coming back to you, Fred. Like, when you talk about all that experience that you've had, have you identified any gaps yourself where it's still unclear to you, like who does what here, or people don't seem to know in general who does what in certain situations?
With the evacuation of Wequity, it really surprised me. I didn't know we were being evacuated until our regional superintendent called me up and says, "Hey, get the hell out of town. We got a fire 2 kilometers away." Well, yeah, we had a fire 2 kilometers away, but like in Good Hope last year, we're all bush people. So we can, jump in our boats if need be and go to the airport instead of having to drive to the airport. And that's why I can understand to some degree. The EMO will declare the emergency in a community, but then it's the community that has to undeclare that. So who is taking responsibility? Is it the territorial government that calls the emergency, or should it be the mayor or the chief that calls the emergency?
We might be able to figure some of this stuff out in the next 25 minutes, which is quite reassuring, because we've probably got about as good a panel as we could have for this. I'm going to sort of throw a modified version of that question out to other members of the panel, and you can come in if you want to. Maybe, Mike, I'm going to come over to you and ask from your perspective, are there gray areas, or are there areas where you see widespread misperceptions of maybe people who don't understand what should happen or what does happen in an emergency? From your perspective, do you sometimes see that there are misconceptions and see that there are things that people, easy ones, you can clear up?
Well, I think Fred is kind of on one of the key points, is that it's not always clearly understood by all with respect to evacuation. So I often get because it's a wildfire, that if a wildfire results in evacuation, forestry made us evacuate, you know what I mean? But we don't call evacuations. That's not our role. We'll definitely give advice and say, look, this fire poses a threat. This is when we anticipate it could be at your community. This is what could affect your escape routes or what have you. So we definitely give advice, but it's not our call to ask for or invoke an emergency evacuation. But the public often perceives this that way. I know I take a lot of calls and direct discussions about why did you evacuate our town and this, and I'm not saying we're not responsible for the wildfire, of course we are, but we don't make the call on respect to, for example, should Yellowknife be evacuated? Well, that wasn't, we didn't come from our office. We give advice, and then people have to make decisions for many reasons with respect to the emergencies. If you're a small fly-in community, how long would it take to get there? Will the weather accommodate? Will the community be smoked in and they can't get out now because of smoke? You know, there's a whole number of factors besides just where the fire is or where whatever the threat is. And again, I'm kind of speaking out of my lane. That's more Michelle's and others' lanes. But I think that's one of the gray areas is, you know, at the end of the day, who signs off and has responsibility for the final call. And I'll let maybe Michelle.
I was going to say, Michelle, let's come to you. I'm sure the EMO has lots to say on this and hears a lot from other people as well. What's your advice to people in the room about some of the issues here that we just heard from Fred and we heard from Mike as well?
Yeah, I think that this is definitely a gray area. When it comes to evacuations for floods, for wildfires, for any type of civil, natural disaster type of emergency, it is the community's decision to decide whether or not they evacuate. And so our regional superintendents would reach out to the SAO because that's our designated point of contact. And we would share whatever information we have from the authority who has the most information on that. So if it's wildfires, we'll reach out to Mike's team or they'll reach out to us. Mike talked about the notification protocol that we have. If it's weather related, we would probably be working with, we have a meteorologist with Environment and Climate Change Canada, who's part of the territorial EMO. And so they share ongoing information with us as well. And if it's related to hydrology, so a flood event, we have ongoing contact with a hydrologist with ECC as well. So lots of experts who know way more about this stuff than even I do, depending on what the emergency is. So we'll take all of the information that we have from those experts, share that with an SAO through our regional superintendent, and then it's up to the community to decide whether or not they would like to evacuate. We did have a community last year who decided, so the recommendation or the advice was probably should evacuate. The community decided not to, and that's okay as well. And things were okay, so that's good. But it is the community's decision to evacuate, and we'll help support them during evacuations if needed.
A follow-up question to that, and maybe everyone else in the room knows the answer to this, and it might just be me because I don't have to worry about a community myself. I just got to worry about cabin radio. Is there essentially a hotline? Is there one central point of authority, whether it's the EMO or elsewhere, where if you are a small community and a fast developing situation happens, let's say, I mean, we have seen wildfires cover great distances in the NWT. We know it's the kind of thing that can escalate really quickly. Is there a 24/7, call this number, someone from the EMO answers it and helps you out with that decision? Is there that sort of facility available?
Yeah, so the territorial EMO operates a 24/7, 365 days a year call line. And that information is available to any of our SAOs. Any of the communities have access to this information. But probably more importantly is having that contact with their regional office because they're going to be far more connected with those communities than we are at the territorial level. We're looking big picture for the territory, whereas the regional offices look after their regions and they're more up to date on what's happening on the ground. So.
Okay. I'm going to go to some questions in the room in a second. I'm just going to pick on you one more time and then open it out to some of the others here. What is one thing that you'd like everyone in this room to take away from this morning? If there was one message that you'd like the EMO to be able to broadcast out to everybody this morning, maybe it's get to know your regional office better, I don't know. What would be that one thing?
I think the biggest thing is having updated community emergency plans. I think we have a few communities here who certainly have updated their plans. They have great communications with their residents. Hey River, good job. Lots of great information out there. They're promoting the Be Ready campaign as we lead up to high risk season. And then they have other information that they're sharing with their community as well. So making sure your community members, your residents are well versed in those community emergency plans. They know where to go to get information and what to do in the event of an emergency.
I'm going to put that same question to everyone else. I'm going to start with Craig here and head back down the line that way. Fred, appreciating you're in a slightly different situation here. So Craig, I'll start with you. If there's just one thing you would want people maybe from the Office of the Fire Marshal's perspective to take away from this, what would it be?
I guess from my standpoint is coming from my experience in Alberta is it's not a quick fix what we're talking about. I know often, like I come from an operational background, fire services or emergency services, so you get stuff done, you get it done quick and you move on. The reality is in the wildfire environment, you see many different government departments. Just on this panel, there's many that could be sitting up here with other mandates and jurisdiction that would affect this work. It's about the cooperation working together and plan it out and not just make knee-jerk reactions, which saw it in 2023, obviously, when communities were getting impacted directly. It was an all hands on deck. We have to get stuff done in the absence of plans. If you don't have the plan, as many saw, some things worked, many things didn't work. We learned by trial and error. It's much better if you have that mapped out on the front end with your community, obviously community emergency plans, then getting into your CWPPs, and then your interface response plans. Like you got a highest level document working your way down, is you need to get those in place. You need to practice them. People need to be aware of them. Otherwise, the next time an event hits, everyone scatters and no one knows what's going on.
I'll come to Jen next.
Thanks. So as part of your planning process, if you have questions about whether or not you need a land use permit, or we're not really in the water license department, but if you think you're talking about maybe doing some clearing, we're the people to call, the Land and Water Board. You can call your regional office if you're out in the regions. You can call the Mackenzie office in Yellowknife, and I'm inviting you to just give us a call. We can help you through the process. We can help you decide if you need any authorizations from us. And we're approachable and can walk you through the process and support that process. So if you have any questions, you just give us a call and we can help with that. Thanks.
What Jen said. No. Just want people to take from this that our resource management officers are here to help you determine whether or not you need additional authorizations outside your community boundaries. And we are approachable and out here to work with you on the ground and help you through the process.
Thanks, yeah, I mean, everyone in this room is here because you have a role in emergency management or community protection at whatever level. So right there is the starting point, is at the local level, all these people need to be talking and working together. I think we've mentioned that a few times and recognize that. With respect to these plans, both Michelle and Craig spoke to it about updating them. At the very minimum, at the very least, the names of people need to be updated every year. There is so much transition in the north, whether at the community level or at the government level. The person that was there 2 years ago, if you haven't updated it, may not be there today. Just as an example, we have 2 new regional forest managers. So that's 2 new people that have to establish relationships at the community level in their region, need to update that information with their plans. And then to Fred's point, if let's just say, for example, the SAO is the main contact, and of course we all know how important SAOs are in the communities, but they travel for work commitments, they need to take some holidays, they got a life, they may not always be there 24/7. So who's the next person and the next person beside them? I think Candace spoke about that yesterday, the redundancy. So it can't just be one name on a list, you need alternates, and that list has to be updated. And hopefully it's more than just emailing around a contact list. Hopefully those people are getting in the room and having a bit of a network conversation, so there's a relationship there, so that when you have to implement this plan, you know who you're speaking to, you've had some conversations, you're comfortable with that person, and you're at ease to have an important discussion. You can't really have a relationship with somebody through email. So I really encourage that face-to-face interaction.
Okay, thanks you guys. Questions in the room? Does anyone here want to ask anything from anyone on the panel who's up here right now? Okay, we got one at the back over here and one over here as well. Let's go.
Hi, it's a question for the majority of the panel. Over the years, the ICS system has been integrated into the communities. I would like to know where that system now stands. Has all the communities been through the ICS system so we're all on the same page? I was listening to the fire chief from high level. As far as I'm concerned, they're ahead of us by leaps and bounds. And kudos to them. You know, Alberta seems to lead the way for Canada the majority of the time, them or Ontario, so we can learn lessons from them. And this is for NAM, and I'm not sure the lady sitting beside her, but in regards to land use, there's the Forest Act, the Forest Protection Act, whatever they call it nowadays. When we have wildfires, as long as we have a kind of a plan, it's like monkeys out of a cage, to be honest, if there's no equipment supervisor. We build lines, do whatever we have to do to contain or stop the fire, as long as we have a reclamation plan after. So my question is, are the communities and the government breaking land use laws? And that's it.
Okay, let's do ICS first, and then we'll come to that second question. On the ICS front, maybe Michelle.
Sure, yeah. So the GNWT has, through emergency management, has adopted ICS as the emergency management framework that we'll use in responding to emergencies. We have encouraged communities to use it, but there's no specific requirement for communities to use ICS. The benefit of using it is that when emergencies do happen, everyone's talking the same language. There's a structured approach to dealing with an emergency. And so certainly still encouraging communities to use it. ICS, the entry-level course, ICS 100, is available to all community governments through the MACA school. And so you can reach out to your regional superintendent to get the login information for that. And then if anybody is looking for additional training beyond that, you can also reach out to your regional superintendent. We'll get you in touch with some trainers for that.
Fred, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I apologize for this. What's your experience like with ICS in terms of where you're at with that and what your access to that and the training for that's like?
I really haven't had any experience with ICS. We're through Clecho government, they're offering training with ICS 200 and 300, and my firemen are going to be getting the 100 as well, but we haven't started yet.
I want to come to Jan and to Naeem maybe on the land use side of things. If you want to grab that microphone off, Michelle.
Thanks. Great question. In the legislation, so I'm paper heavy administrative, Naeem does the field stuff. When emergencies happen, there is a provision in the legislation for emergencies to happen. They happen, they're allowed to happen, and basically all we're asking for is for someone to call us after the emergency response is done to say, hey, this is what we did. That's all we're asking for, and that's all that the legislation requires.
Naeem, did you want to add anything to that?
Not really. It sounded like Yogi's question was related to in the face of an emergency. In the absence of a fire, if you let the monkeys out of the barrel, you are breaking the prohibitions of the land use regulations outside the any municipal boundary, and you do require a land use permit for that type of activity. But in the face of a wildfire, Section 17 of the land use regs allows for those monkeys to do their business, the monkey business.
So when it comes to flood, is it the same rule as fire?
That's right. It's any emergency. Yeah.
I'd just like to add to that, declaring a state of local emergency does give a community additional powers to be able to execute that type of activity. So if you do have to do that, you would need to have a state of local emergency declared to gain those additional powers for that particular event. And as they said, you know, you'd want to make sure that you do follow up with them and let them know. I think one of the things that we've missed here is when that stuff happens, you're going to deal with the emergency and you'll take whatever action is required. But I guess the intent is to work for all intents and purposes, working in a way that you would be in adherence to the legislation. So aside from the notification and getting the permit, that whatever the earthworks are, that they would still be acceptable to the regulators.
I saw a couple of other hands up over here. Just remind me, I know someone else had a question, I think, in the back. Maybe it was over here. One, Danny.
On that same topic, is it clear now, after the state of emergency is declared, what will be refunded to the communities? Like in terms of cost?
Yes, so the update to the NWT emergency plan does articulate better what some of those types of reimbursable expenses are. It's not an exhaustive list. We've done, you know, sort of an overarching approach to that. One of the things that we implemented last year during emergencies is with the EMO, we have people in-house who are experts in the disaster assistance policy and the disaster financial assistance arrangements, and they have direct contacts with the federal government. And so, you know, there's no pot of money in the NWT that just sits there waiting for emergencies to happen. We cash flow it in the government as best we can when emergencies happen. But one of the things for communities is the cash flow is also an issue during emergencies. And so what we implemented last year is we dedicated a finance direct contact with MACA, a finance expert and someone who's very well versed in disaster assistance. And they work directly with the community finance people so that when decisions are being made on what will be reimbursable and what won't be reimbursable, communities are up to speed on that before they make those decisions. So hopefully, you know, I think that's something that worked really well last year, and we plan to continue doing that.
I just wanted to jump in and step back to that ICS question, though. Couple points. One is my recommendation is that all local firefighters take the appropriate level of ICS training, and then that way, if that day comes where we need to join forces and respond, everyone's on the same page with respect to how the organizational structure works, roles and responsibilities. And the other piece is for mayors or SAOs, senior executives within your community, there's also a ICS for executives course. So it's I believe it's just a half day, but it gives the, you know, executives an overview of ICS and how it works. And so you don't need all the nuts and bolts, but you should have a good understanding of what your team is doing and the system they're operating under. So I don't know if that's offered through MACA as well, the executive course. So, okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Mike is saying too, we do see, you know, we've talked, you guys yesterday talking about collaboration and sharing information. I would also say that having people trained in ICS is really valuable in that if one community has staff trained and another community is dealing with an emergency and it's more long-term, you may be able to work with another community who's trained in ICS to have like an incident management team deployed to your own community, and they can step in and fill those boots quite easily because of this training. And so I think that's something that we found beneficial even within the GNWT. At the start of COVID, we actually worked with ECC and had some of their staff who were trained to come in and relieve some of our staff, because that was an extended period. So they were really helpful and instrumental in helping us get through that. So having people trained on this program, we can share those resources. Communities can share those resources. And so that's one other benefit that we can consider there.
Okay. Question down here with Travis. This will be our last one.
Just on that, I didn't know if you guys are putting any thought into setting up a system down the road, much like Alberta has, with identifying teams that are available for deployment to communities to help with those incident management needs, right? I feel like it's hand in hand, and being able to support communities with people with that experience, I think, to help manage their incidents would be, I think it's key in Alberta, and it's kind of a bit of a gap that we have right now. You can have a community request from another community, but having a coordination from a territorial level on, hey, here's some qualified resources that can support you for operations or logistics or any of that. So much like ECC is able to pull from people from across Canada for incident management teams, I feel for our community governments there's a bit of a gap there.
Yeah, I think that's certainly in 2023, we did use the services of CAN Task Force, which I'm sure that's probably who you're referring to there. They helped the city at some point during 23. They worked with EMO as well. There's nothing specific right now within the NWT that we're looking at, but we want to get people trained up within the territory first. There are still resources. We could still call on CAN Task Force 2. There's groups like Team Rubicon and groups like that as well, who are all well-versed in ICS, and that's how they operate. So the thing when we call for those types of resources out of territory is that we have to be very clearly able to demonstrate that we have exhausted all of our resources within the community, within the region, and then within the territory. So when we start looking at those federal asks or national asks, we have to be able to demonstrate that we've exhausted all of our resources.
Okay, we are out of time. Huge thanks to this panel for all your presentations, your answers there. Thank you.